When I was about 6 years old, around 2004, my mom started taking my sister and I to Dr. Daniel's pediatric dental office. The dental center was located inside a giant yellow mansion that also doubled as Dr. Daniel's house. It was honestly gorgeous. When I first started going to the dentist, I was extremely shy and actually suffered from selective mutism and had a lot of autistic-like tendencies. Needless to say, I relied heavily on my mother's comfort and for someone to give me a voice because it was extremely anxiety-inducing for me to talk to strangers, especially men for some reason. When my sister and I got called in from the waiting room, my mom followed us to the office until she was told by Dr. Daniels that parents were not allowed to be with their children, as it taught kids independence, to which my mom complied. Once in there, he immediately separated my sister and I, and in reaction to that, I cried because I felt so scared. Dr. Daniels did not like crying, so he grabbed me and put his hands over my mouth and nose, shook me, and aggressively warned me that if I continued to cry and scare the other kids, that he would make my situation a lot worse. Obviously, this scared me even more, so I started to cry again. Dr. Daniels had enough and took me into his house, part of the dentist office, where he screamed at me again, grabbed me by the neck and shoved me. His hygienist Judy came over and told me if I continued to cry, she would spank me so hard I wouldn't know what had hit me. Afterwards, he gave me a juice concoction and left me alone in his house for about 5 minutes until he took me back into the dental office and did work on my teeth. I guess I just instinctively knew that if I wanted to survive, I just had to act like I was not terrified and hold in the tears. All I wanted was my mommy. After the first appointment, my sister and I told my mom that we were scared of the dentist and that he was a mean man, but she just took it as me being an anxious child, so we continued to see him. Each visit was just as terrifying. Every time we pulled into the mansion, my heart just melted away inside my chest. I was so scared. It was no longer pretty to look at. Every time we went to the dentist, Dr. Daniels, or the tooth man as he called himself, always had us have heavy dental work procedures done. We had seals done on several baby teeth and plenty of teeth removed, some with his fingers with no regards to pain level at all. And often when having a tooth removal or seals done, your mouth had to be opened up with a retractor. He would leave us there with the retractor on for about 45 minutes or so before he came to work on our teeth. Sometimes he would eat his lunch while we sat there with our mouth open. Probably one of the worst pains I have ever felt in my life. I remember one time when I was about in 3rd grade, I had been leaned down in the chair, waiting with the retractor on for an hour. I was in so much pain I couldn't take it. I sat up on the chair and tried to scream and cry as loud as I could. Dr. Daniels came rushing over, angry as could be, took my retractors off, and then took me back into his house part again, where he screamed at me for being a big baby and scaring all the other kids. I was so sad for myself because I hadn't cried in so long. He then took me back to the dental chair and pinned me down to my seat in a straitjacket. He put my retractors back on and said that I would have to wait longer because I caused such a scene. All I could do was shed silent tears and drool everywhere, and I couldn't even wipe it because he locked up my arms. Afterwards, my mouth would become so swollen and filled with rashes. It hurt to talk for days. It would leave bruises and swells as soon as I left his chair. He would often tell my mother I was a difficult patient if I so much as winced at his torture. Once he removed 6 of my teeth at once and I could barely eat. While he ripped out teeth, he would often sing songs. It was so Sweeney Todd-like. When I was in 7th grade, I started getting some new braces and we started seeing an orthodontist. Not long after that, we stopped seeing Dr. Dan and started seeing a new dentist who was actually nice. I had never known that getting your teeth cleaned didn't have to feel like going through a saw trap. I think my mom took us out of Dr. Dan's practice when the orthodontist looked at our dental records and saw a lot of unnecessary procedures being done on our mouths. Not long ago, I was having a conversation with a friend about our childhood fears, and instantly my mind went to the tooth man. Curious, I Googled him to see what had happened to him, and to my happiness, the practice was shut down. Also left under his name was a Yelp page that was still left up. The page was filled with numerous one-star reviews from former patients that were once abused as kids in his office, using the page as an outlet to express their trauma. I started to cry because their experiences were so close, and some identical to what I went through when I was a kid. It was so sad, but at the same time really validating to know that I was not alone. A lot of the procedures we went through were just a scam for him to collect money off our parents' insurance. And now that I think about it, he probably was so adamant on us not crying and screaming for help, because he didn't want parents to hear and come see what was going on. I shake thinking about this. I really pray that he hasn't opened up another practice somewhere else. I know it's hard not to blame parents in this situation, but the truth is, this man was a swift abuser. For every bruise and swell we had, he would have dental explanations that would make the parents feel stupid for asking. He was an authority figure. I don't blame my mom for not believing us. She knew he was firm, but probably thought we were confusing firmness with meanness. To be honest, even writing this, the torture was so wild it actually sounds made up. She eventually did come around. She's not alone, as there were hundreds and hundreds of parents that were duped and deceived by him. To Dr. Dan, please never let us meet again, and to any parent reading this, if you are ever told to not go in with your child to an appointment, something's really not right. This happened to me just a few days ago, and I'm still shaken up by it, especially as the police came to take our report about the situation just yesterday. I live with my mom, sister, baby brother, and dog, and occasionally my mom's boyfriend. And since I finished my academic year a few weeks ago, I've been home alone a lot more often. Usually it's me and the dog left in the house when she goes out somewhere, and we don't usually lock the front door when I'm home alone, since we live in a relatively safe neighborhood, and it's not like the house is unoccupied if I'm there. I had just finished eating my dinner and was sitting on my favorite armchair in the living room watching YouTube videos. This armchair faces the living room door directly, which was open, meaning I could see the stairs and most of the hallway leading into the house from the front door, though I couldn't see the door itself. As I was watching one of my videos, I heard the front door open and I turned the volume on my phone down, since I didn't want to wake the baby just in case he was asleep, and the front door closed essentially as soon as I turned the volume down. So I called out a hello, wondering why my mom was being so quiet. But I was met with silence, and when I got up to check, there was nobody near the door. Since my dog wasn't barking at all, as she always makes the loads of noise whenever anyone passes in front of our house or knocks on our door as if to enthusiastically greet her new friend, I assumed I'd just imagined it from anticipating the noise. Auditory hallucinations aren't entirely uncommon for me, so I just tried to brush it off and told myself that the unease I felt was just paranoia and overactive anxiety. I sat back in the same chair, but didn't resume my video as the loud sound of my phone in the otherwise deathly quiet house just put me further on edge. So I sat drinking my cider in silence as my dog sat at my feet. That meant that I couldn't miss the sound of the door opening again and footsteps coming into my house. I was already on high alert from the previously unsettling event, So my heart was pounding now as I registered that. Once again, I couldn't hear the wheels of the buggy, the baby crying, my mom's voice, or the clacking of her heels I knew she was wearing. Just the soft padding of unfamiliar feet into my house. At this point, I was frozen with my eyes fixed on the part of the hallway visible to me from where I was sat, and the silhouette of an unfamiliar man came into view on the wall. I was terrified, willing for him to have just mistaken this for his home, for him to apologize to the empty air and swiftly exit the door again, before he could take those few precious steps forward that would allow him to see me. However, my dog started to bark and growl aggressively at the man, something she had rarely done before. I hadn't even registered that she'd left where she was sat in front of me, being frozen with fear. Still silent, the man left immediately and the door slammed shut behind him. I released the breath I was holding and crept out of the hallway to lock my door after him. Thoroughly shaken, I made my way back to the living room, wanting to get away from that door when I realized the man was still pacing in front of the house. With the bitter taste of panic making itself once again known in my throat, I hastily called my mom as I half expected the man to try the door handle again. I didn't immediately call the police because I didn't really think that a crime had been committed. I was still repeating to myself that he had probably just gotten lost and entered the wrong house, especially since he had his phone in front of him while he was pacing. I found it easier to believe that he didn't have any malicious intent. The man did leave after a little while, and my mom promised to come home immediately. I did give my dog a treat for being such a good guard dog and protecting her home. Despite feeling much safer now that he was gone, I couldn't help but go over how strange it was that he didn't even knock before he opened the door, or how silent he was when he came in. Like he could have been straining to hear the video I'd been playing before or any sign of life. Later that day, when my mom and her boyfriend went to get dinner, they saw a guy who matched my description with a carrier bag from the grocery store. But none of us have seen him since, so the fear I felt from the prospect of him living nearby has died down considerably. I really hope he didn't have bad intentions, but just to be on the safe side, random guy who walked into my house, let's not meet again. A lot of these posts are about men creeping out women, but this one is a little different. This one takes place in early 2010. I was 16 years old and played lacrosse. I liked girls, but I didn't know much about flirting or anything. One day, I was heading home with my lacrosse stuff, and a woman walked up to me and asked if I played. I told her I did, and I was captain of my team, since I was so proud of that. She said that was interesting and asked me how old I was. I told her I was 16, and she laughed and said she was 38 years old. After this, she told me I was cute and said she'd love to come to one of my lacrosse games. This woman told me to take her number down several times, so I did, but I didn't plan on texting her. The next day, I was talking to a teammate and I told him about the incident. He laughed and told me I was a liar. To prove it, I decided to text her and ask her age again. She responded with, "Baby, I'm 38, hope I'm not too old for you. When's your next game?" I didn't know what to say, so I just showed him and didn't respond. She then double texted me and sent me a few nudes. I felt really put off by this, so I told her I was going to practice and didn't respond. Later that night, she texted me asking what I was doing and if I wanted to come over. I told her I can't because I'm doing homework. She told me she could help out and show me a few things, to which I said no and had a mini panic attack. I turned my phone off and went to bed. A few days later, I was getting ready for my next game when I see a familiar face in the stands. I look closer and it's her. "Hi there," she says. My stomach absolutely dropped. I mustered the guts to wave back and tried to put it in the back of my mind, but I couldn't shake it. After the game, she came up to me and asked if I wanted to come over. I told her I normally shower after games and she said I could use hers. I then told her me and some teammates were hanging out and tried to walk off. This woman grabbed my arm and asked why I've been dodging her. She asked if I was man enough for her and said I need to stop playing games. My coach heard and came over and asked if everything was good, to which I said hell no and tried to get her off me. My coach ended up restraining her while I backed away. As I'm walking away, I hear her say, "Whatever, you a gay boy anyway." I felt so sick I could have vomited. After this, I had to have a meeting with my coach, my parents, and the principal of my school. They explained to me that this woman was wrong and should not have sent me those messages or come to my game. They reassured me that I did nothing wrong, which is why I didn't tell them about this sooner, and that this woman was nutty as squirrel crap. I promised myself and my parents that if I saw her again, I'd press charges for stalking and for sending nudes to a minor, but I never did. Thanks for reading, guys. Here's what happened 2 years ago in complete honesty. I was 29 in the airport heading back home to Fort Lauderdale from a long work conference. They called for everyone to start boarding the flight. I, as usual, waited until last to board because I don't see the hurry in boarding first. I get annoyed by the crowds that rush to get on or off a flight. As I'm finally getting up to board the plane, I notice a very tall guy with sunglasses, piercings, a weird outfit, and loud as hell also getting up to board. It dawned on me that it was Dennis Rodman. I immediately texted my husband, who said that I must get a picture with him. We line up to board and I see a kid run up to him for an autograph. DR obliged and signed something for him. They then scanned our tickets and we waited to get onto the plane. There were a couple guys behind us and in front of us, all staring at him. DR cracked a few jokes and I noticed his voice was slurring a bit. He had definitely been drinking. I took a breath and said, "Excuse me, I'm so sorry to fangirl, but would I be able to take a pic with you?" He turned towards me and smiled. A clever, "Oh yeah, you want my autograph" grin. He said, all right, let's do this," or something like that. I gave my phone to one of the guys next to me and then DR stood next to me and gave me a hug. His hands embraced my torso and his hands brushed clumsily all over my breasts. It wasn't an accident. They were gropes and he wouldn't let go of me. The guys surrounding us immediately noticed and chuckled and whispered amongst themselves. I shut down. I got so embarrassed and just broke away from the hug and giggled nervously. I didn't know how to react, and I felt so stupid and angry for it. But it didn't stop there. DR then asked where I was sitting, to which I replied, trying to be clever, "I don't know, by the back, not in first class." He grabbed my ticket and said, "Okay, we're gonna make this happen. I'm gonna sit next to you." My heart dropped. I did not want to sit next to him. We boarded the plane and he followed me all the way to the back where my seat was, way past his first class seat. Everyone was staring. My heart was racing. We finally get to my row and there's my empty window seat with the next two occupied by a guy in the middle seat and a woman on the aisle. He then asked the guy if he wanted to sit in first class so that he could sit next to me. "I'd really like to stay and sit next to my wife," said the guy in the middle seat. Thank God he did not move for DR. I go, "Sorry, it was nice meeting you." DR awkwardly rushed back down the plane to first class. I sat and felt as if everyone was staring at me, wondering who I was. I ignored them and put my headphones on and breathed a sigh of relief that it was all over. I took my time getting off the plane and didn't run into him again. I still kick myself for not reacting in a more courageous manner. But it was such a weird situation. Dennis Rodman, you're creepy as hell. Let's never meet again.